So we're
Well, the clock stopped because I was gone long enough. And I probably misset it by a minute or two.
ready.
We're ready. Okay, so I'll start off welcoming everybody to the Planning Commission meeting of October 14th. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if Janet will lead us in that.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Janet, can you lead us next in the roll call?
Commissioner Gupta,
Here.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Here.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Here.
Chairman Hansen.
Here.
And staff is represented by Monowitz, Fox, and Montes.
At the beginning, no, let's do minutes. We have minutes in front of us. Is there any other updates or changes or a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
I move to accept the minutes as revised and posted.
Second.
Okay, we've got a vote in front of us. Roll call.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Aye.
Chairman Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you.
At the beginning of every session, we allow some time for people to speak to the board about items that are not on today's agenda. I don't know if we have anybody available, but I'll ask Janet if there is. She'll proceed to describe how we will handle call-ins from the public.
Thank you. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise your hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period and for each period on the regular agenda item, we will ask you, and for those members who wish to comment, to click the raised hand feature to raise your hand to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise your hand function. For example, if you cannot raise your hand on the beginning of your meeting, if your item is later in that meeting, when you hear your name called, we will prompt you to unmute your account and inform you that you may begin speaking. So right now, I don't see any hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Okay, then we'll proceed to our one item on the agenda. Janet, could you read that in, please, for us?
Sure. We have item number 1, owner Wei Zhang, applicant Ed Love, file number PLN 2019-00162, location vacant parcel located between 631 and 647 El Granado Boulevard. And the project planner is Olivia Boo.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to Olivia for a presentation.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners and planning staff. I'll review the plans redesign that happened during the COSI Design Review Committee meeting, appeal points, and then some additional changes designed that were done after the staff approval. So this is a map that shows the location of the proposed residence. It is in the hills of El Granada, a vacant lot. And it is in a developed neighborhood. There are developed parcels on both sides of the project. This is a photo. I have a couple of photos. So where you see the bulk of the vegetation, that is the subject parcel. This is to facing the project from the street view. The one existing developed home to the left of the property. This is also the appellant's residence. And this is at the same viewpoint. This is the developed home, two-story home to the right of the subject parcel. Start with the chronology. The project was received in May 2019. The first COSI design review meeting was in November, at which time there was a significant amount of opposition to the bulk and mass of the home. And the applicant was asked to decrease the height, and which overall would affect the overall height of the home, as well as consider recessing the home into the existing grade. This is the rendition of the exterior of the original proposed home. And then this is the revision. So the outline, the red outline shows the original roof line, and then it coming down with the interior lowering of the roof of the height of the rooms, and then overall it affected the overall height of the home. This redesign lowering, and I'm sorry, that also with that rendition was lowering the included triggering some minor grading, 330 cubic yards, that was able to lower the home into the grade of the topography. This redesign was brought back to the COSI design review in February of 2020. The interested parties were still very concerned about the massing. They didn't feel like it was substantial enough. And so the COSI Design Review Committee asked for the applicant to consider further reducing massing by reducing the front entry door area, which was initially a two-story entry, and then also moving back the second story away, recess from the front, from the first story, which would help reduce bulk. And this is the next photo. So this shows in the red outline, the wall on the front facade used to be flush, and now the second story is moved back. And this is also on the left side of the home. This is an aerial view. This shows the changes of where the second story steps back from the first story on the front and left facades. And another showing of the floor plan and the changes. This was brought back, so this second redesign was brought back to the COSI design review in April of 2020, and it was recommended approval at that hearing. And then because of, it was a recommendation because of the triggering of the grading of the 330 cubic yards of grading that was necessary to lower the house. And so thus the decision was then, at that point, is made by staff, the community development director. That approval was issued in May, and then the appeal was subsequently received in May. For the points of appeal, the first point of that the proposal does not consider natural hazards data, appropriate mitigation measures, and fire policies. The property and surrounding area is not in an Alquist-Priola earthquake fault zone or a landslide or liquefaction zone. This was confirmed by both the GIS and also by the geotech consultants report prepared by Sigma Prime. The parcel does have a competent bedrock, and the design of the residence will be constructed to meet current earthquake resistant standards. The project has been reviewed by geotechnical staff and meets county regulations. Regarding the fire policies, Coastside Fire Protection District has also reviewed the project and granted conditional approval. Fire conditions have been added to the project, including an upgrading the fire hydrant, wired smoke detectors and automatic fire sprinklers, requirement that the property be within 500 feet of the fire hydrant. The hydrant has to substantiate adequate fire flow and water pressure, and then providing adequate road access. There is a pending litigation between the appellant and the applicants regarding a prescriptive easement along the left property line. Actually, sorry, I need to pause for a moment. Janice, sorry, is there a way that I'm trying to get the screen? How do I use my screen to get the other, everyone else on the top of my screen? Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, what was that the question again?
I have my display. I'm trying to adjust my screen so that I
Mhm.
have all of you to the right of my screen. I need to move it to the top.
Oh,
Is that display?
I believe on the top right-hand side, you should see that says swap screen video. If you click on it, it should give you the option to do that. Is your notes in the way?
Yeah, it's on top of my screen. Somehow it's on top of my screen.
Yeah, no, I don't think it can do that.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Got
Sorry
it?
about that. Yeah. So there is a pending litigation between the appellant and the applicant regarding the determination of a prescriptive easement along the left side of the property. Also, the roof eaves designed with the home encroach into that same left side yard setback and into the alleged prescriptive easement. The applicant does wish to proceed with the hearing on the appeal of the planning permit despite the pending litigation. And the existing litigation does not prevent the county from processing the permits required to construct the project. This is a visual to show you where the mustard yellow line shows the alleged prescriptive easement. That is currently the civil suit between the two property owners. And then the red mark shows the encroachment of the roof eave. The easement is approximately 1,200 square feet. It runs, as you can see, it runs parallel to the left property line. The applicant is aware that if the decision is made that the prescriptive easement is, if the decision is made in favor of the prescriptive easement, it will affect the overall lot size, and then the house will need to be redesigned to reduce the footprint. Regarding the eave, it was designed appropriately with a standard 2-foot eave, which is standard for development. However, as you can see, the orientation of the home in regards to the shape of it and then how it fits with the setback with the shape of the property boundaries, that in this situation, although it is a standard roof depth, it did encroach, and thus it has been since redesigned and no longer encroaches. This is a closer view of, this is the redesigned roof eave that no longer encroaches. Another point of appeal is that a qualified geotechnical engineer has not been retained for the project. The project includes integrity of the hillside. It compromises the integrity of the hillside, causing sedimentary pollution in nearby waterways. So a licensed engineer can offer and provide geotechnical engineering services. State law allows civil engineers to prepare geotechnical reports. The geotechnical license is an additional license that a civil engineer may choose to obtain, but it does not provide a civil engineer with any additional practicing authority. Regarding the drainage and the drainage calculations submitted, the applicant did, the plans are prepared by the civil engineer, and it was revised. And then subsequently on July 21st, it was revised and also reviewed, has been reviewed by county staff, and it is in compliance. The proposal should comply with general plan policies regarding environmental concerns per chapter, general plan chapters 1 and 2. The submitted biologist report noted that no special status species are documented or likely to occur within the project area. An initial submittal the project is in response to the biologist report. The project is conditioned to require pre-construction survey for nesting birds, for shrubs or tree removal activities, and that these vegetation removal activities to occur during the non-nesting season. Planning and building department's analysis lacks transparency and appears designed to avoid appellant's review of staff's decisions. The project is not located in a known geotechnical hazard area. Thus, a geotechnical report was not required during the planning process. This, to note a couple of pieces of information here. So the appellant did, during the hearing, the appellant did request a copy of the geotechnical report. The applicant did directly provide that to the appellant. And it was not until the, also that when the grading was triggered, the 330 cubic yards was triggered, staff did request the grading, the soils report from the applicant. The soils report was, the appellant noted the biological report was not available online. Staff did upload the biologist report to the permit tracking system and also did email the report to the appellant in September. Sorry, this was just continuation of the response of the that the report is reviewed. In general cases, also the report is analyzed by geotechnical county staff at the analyzed at the building permit stage. I'd like to go over the general compliance. So this is in the S17 Development Standards District. It complies with all of the requirements, the building site, minimum size, the side yards, rear yards, building height, lot coverage, and floor area ratio. There is a circumstance, it's a unique circumstance, but it's not of any variance of any type. So the front yard is required to be 20 feet. And you'll see that in the, this is 7.5 inches, feet, I'm sorry. In this scenario, you are allowed, zoning regulations do allow that if the properties on both sides of the property are developed for the two adjoining properties on each side, that there is an allowance outright that the front setback of the proposed building can be an average of those two existing setbacks. And I wanted to show you a visual of that. So to the right is the 2-story home, and then to the left is the single-story home, which is, again, is the appellant's property. It was measured that these, the measurements of these front setbacks and taking the average of the two. So the project at 7.5 feet does comply. Regarding the project's compliance with regulations, It complies with the local coastal program, and it meets, as this just discussed, it does meet the S17 development standards regarding general plan and grading ordinance. It meets the chapters noted here: soil resources, visual quality, urban land use, water supply, wastewater, natural hazards, and fire hazards. For the findings, recommendations, it was determined to be in compliance with the design review standards for 1-family and 2-family residential development in the Mid-Coast. And staff is asking and recommending to the Planning Commission to deny the appeal and uphold the Community Development Director's decision. That is the end of my presentation. I am available for any questions. I do also know that the applicant is present, and I believe the geotechnical soils engineer is present for any detailed geotechnical soils questions.
Thank you, Olivia. I'll turn it over to the fellow commissioners, and I'll start off with Commissioner Santa Cruz. Do you have any questions of staff?
I love that you always start with me. That really put me on my toes, that I have to really do my work.
Your picture's on top of on all these things. I just go down.
I'm gonna have to talk to Janet to put me on the bottom then. Okay, listen. I have some questions regarding this project. One of which is I heard that by Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Anyway, the presentation was great, very informative. I really appreciate your input. I should start by saying that. I noticed that there is a pending appeal on this process, and my concern is that the staff report only address, out of the 9 pending litigation matter, they only address the geothermal project, the engineering part, and didn't address the rest. That's one question that I have. And one of the most important issues in the pending litigation is the easement issue. And I just wanted to find out that if the part of the project is encroached in the parcel of the appellant, and if we approve this project, what will happen with the pending litigation that is going on right now? That's one question. And another one is, why as a staff we wanted to approve this project knowingly that it's a pending litigation on the project? Thank you, Lisa. I mean, Olivia.
Olivia.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Santa. I will answer that, and then I'll ask Mr. Fox to chime in if he's got anything to add. So the dispute is really over property ownership. It's a civil matter between the 2 property owners. The Planning and Building Department has an obligation to process permit applications based on the facts as we know them. And the facts as we know them are that this project is compliant with setback requirements and so forth. So just because a neighbor may argue that they have some right over their neighbor's property, unless that's established by a court of law, we have an obligation to process permit application. So in the event that a court was to side with the appellant and determine that they had some interest in the applicant's property, then the applicant would be obligated to redesign the project to comply. But, you know, that's a matter really between the 2 property owners to resolve in court. We look at it objectively based on the facts that we know. So, Mr. Fox, you have anything to add?
No, I think you've summed it up nicely. I would add that the county, in performing its zoning and building function, is under a number of timelines that are established by state law that don't include exceptions for when there's controversy between the applicant and neighbors. So the county can't be put in a position where it puts a development application on pause just because it thinks that it would be wise to do so. And we did give, as I recall, we did give the applicant the opportunity to wait until the civil matter with the neighbor was resolved before proceeding with the application, but the applicant decided to proceed at risk. So it's just something that occasionally happens, and our process is that we do our part, which is to determine whether or not the project complies with our rules. And if the project requires the resolution by some other body or agency, that can proceed on a separate track, but we do our job pursuant to our timelines.
Okay, team, I have a question. What would be an example of at risk that the applicant decided to take if and when he moved forward?
Well, drawings are expensive, and applicants pay design professionals to prepare a packet of materials for the benefit of the planning and building department. And in a design review district, those materials are expensive and expensive to draw. If late in the process, there's a determination that the parcel includes an easement that must be excluded from the gross land area for purposes of calculating the building size, then it's essentially a complete redo of the design because the total amount of square footage of the parcel might change as a result of whatever the court does. So that would be a good example of how when an applicant decides to proceed, taking the risk and believing that they're going to win the contested matter in court, that if they're wrong, there's a pretty serious consequence visited upon the applicant because they got approval of a design that now can't be built. But I want to be absolutely clear, nothing the Planning Commission does will constitute an adjudication of the controversy between the neighbors. We're not deciding who has the better half of the argument. We're simply saying that the design meets our standards when we approve a project and grant permits. We don't override the private property rights of adjacent neighbors if they have them.
So what I hear you saying is that even if there is a litigation and we approve the plan as presented, there may be a better chance because you're talking about only the drawing and expenses of drawing that this project will go to court before being finally built.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, Steve, one question for you is in the staff report, why are we only respond to geothermal engineering aspect when the appellant said that it seems to him that that the department is not, it's some sort of like, let me paraphrase it. It's something like the department is not concerned and it's not really caring for his point of view. But when we respond, we only address the geothermal issue. Can you explain that to me? Maybe I misinterpret.
Well,
I
Go ahead,
can,
Olivia.
so I can start off. They did have concerns about, for example, the fire issues and fire hazards, as well as drainage and the, well, I'm not gonna, so you already mentioned the liquefaction, but these were addressed, and we have, as I had mentioned in my presentation, fire did review the project, and they have certain conditions, some of which I included in my presentation and in the staff report. There are certain conditions, specific conditions that they need to comply with, one of them being the fire sprinklers, et cetera, and the fire hydrant. They do need to comply with those, and they've been given conditional approval, knowing that they have to show those on the plans at the building permit stage. In terms of drainage, they have done a revision. And actually the page I have up on the screen is actually the latest revised one. They have done that, and it has been reviewed by staff, county drainage staff, which also meets county regulations. And I do know that I think if I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm not an expert in it from the geotechnical aspect. Their consultant can address those more specifically.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivia. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Turn it over next for questions will be Commissioner Gupta.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions. One is, I didn't see in our staff report any complaints from any neighbors. The appellant talks about how there was so much of pollution and things because of flagpoles. But I didn't see any correspondence or anything in writing by any of the neighbors. So, Olivia, have you come across anything that we don't see here? Or you have any additional information?
So there were items noted from the design review committee. However, with proceeding with the appeal to the planning commission, the appellant had included references to the pollution that was stated with, it happened that the story poles that were put up for this project. And
Right.
when I reviewed the attachments, those were photos of that. There was evidence and photos of that to show what they had dealt with during the staff level design review committee stage of this project of flagpoles littering the streets and nearby properties. I included specifically what the what the appellant included because he was filing the appeal.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Understood. Okay, my other question was, you already mentioned that the roof eaves encroachment has been taken care of, so that is no longer an issue. And to my understanding, they are still allowed, or the applicant is still allowed to have up to 2 feet beyond or 2 feet into the setback. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, yes, because that is the standard for development. But it was in this case that the standard depth was not going to work because of the angles of how things were being developed.
Okay. Thank you. And my last question is on this table that you have.
Yes.
Where you pointed out the different like setbacks, building heights, etc.
Correct.
I had a question about this maximum lot coverage. I'm just trying to understand that. Is there a way for you to put that up?
Yeah, let me go back to that, sorry. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. It's further back. Here, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So the second last one, which says maximum lot coverage. I'm trying to figure out what is this 4,350 square feet number?
Oh, so
How
that
did
is
we
a calculation. Let me try and break that down.
I think
25% of what?
Yeah, simply put, there's a limit on the extent to which you can cover a vacant lot. And the limit is at 25% of the square footage. So 25% of the entire lot is 4,350 square feet. The proposed project is only covering 15%. So it's 10% less coverage than is allowed as a limit.
Actually, I'm sorry, Steve. I need to correct this. I I'm looking up that number. This project is making use of all of what's available. I'm sorry. I apologize. That was a typo. I'm bringing up the original plans. I don't know how that happened. Let's see here.
Well, thanks for correcting. I was just interpreting the chart here. So obviously the
Right. Yeah, because that's too high. It's 25% of 5,000 cannot be 4,000 square feet.
I would never question your math, Commissioner Gupta.
Thank you for your confidence, Steve.
So their allowance is 35%. I very much apologize. I thought I didn't check my numbers well enough. They are within what is allowed. They are in compliance with the lot coverage allowance.
Okay. Okay. Yes, you know that one, that part. I'm just questioning this number, 4,350 square feet.
So what happens is whatever, in this case, for the 35% allowance, it calculates that times the parcel size, the actual parcel size, and that will come out to, that will determine how much square footage that the applicant is able to work with. And that's set by the S17 standards. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
So we don't know how this we arrived at this number, 4,350.
I think that's simply a typo in error.
That's a typo. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, got it. But it should be 25% the way it is in the chart.
No, Olivia is saying 35%.
35%. Okay.
Actual limit.
Okay. So is there need to correct it here?
Yeah, it was the error in the presentation.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yes, so they are within that.
Yes.
Meeting all the standards there.
Yes, we would, if they did not meet it, we would have to, we would ask them to, reduce the square footage and comply. Unless unless in some cases in other projects that, people may have an option to ask for some kind of variance.
Variances. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Olivia, I'm sorry that I am just barging, but I kind of got confused about this maximum lot coverage. You're saying that they proposed 35%, but the maximum required is 25%, so they are exceeding the maximum lot coverage?
No, their project is in compliance with everything that is required by the S17 standards. As I mentioned with Commissioner Gupta, I apologize, my numbers are incorrect. They are allowed 35%, and they are
25%.
Yeah, they are in compliance.
Okay, great. I want to clarify that. I was confused at that moment. Thank you very much, Olivia.
Okay, we'll go on to Commissioner Ketchum.
Thank you. How are the adjacent homes allowed to have such small front setbacks? Do we know?
I am going to speculate that at the time they were built, I don't recall the history of back when they were built. I don't know exactly when they were built. But they do have, sometimes properties do have reduced setbacks. Either could be based on zoning at the time.
Okay, another question is about the story poles. It seems that the standards for story pole materials were ignored, and the flimsy pennants used instead of the sturdy 2-foot wide netting. And so I just wondering, why was this deteriorating situation, why wasn't that addressed before all the pennants flew into the wind? No wonder somebody objected to the concept of story poles.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate situation, and I do believe that in most cases, or in other cases, the story poles happen to include small flags attached to them, and then the weather obviously did not help in that situation. So they were asked before at the hearing of the design review committee, they were asked to try and remove those type that material as quickly as possible, and ultimately the applicant did take care of it. And it's been noted that moving further into the future, just by discussion with the COSI Design Review Committee, that to try our best to make sure that future flagpoles, when they are installed, not to include flags.
Yeah, that seems a key point. And saw this in the past too. Big Wave put story poles up and they use pennants as well. You could hardly see them from a distance. So they're pretty unsatisfactory on every level. So that's a key point to keep in mind when we come up with the new ordinance. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez, you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I do. First of all, I just want to say, Olivia, thank you very much for your excellent report and presentation. And it sounds like you may be fighting something, so I hope you clear that up. My question is, from the aerial plans that you showed, do either side of the houses on either side, do they meet? Yeah, that one right here. Do they meet their own side setbacks? It seems like they're a little tight, especially the house on the left.
Offhand, I would have to check that, and it would take a little bit of time, but
Yeah.
it could be the case. However, again, based on, without being able to scale it, it is a possibility that these homes were built,
Yep.
at the time when they were built, that the regulations may have been different.
Correct. Okay, that's right. Because you were saying that about the front setback.
Correct.
So my other question is in regards to the easement, and I'm glad you put this picture up right here. So in the new redesigned, they have moved this away now so that it doesn't encroach into the setback, right?
Correct.
Okay. So even if the appellant was to win the civil case, the owner wouldn't necessarily have to redesign the house in order to meet any additional requirements with regards to the setback. Am I interpreting that correctly?
They have, if it is decided upon in favor of them, there is a possibility that they would have to reduce, modify the footprint.
And there would be two reasons for that, I believe, Commissioner Ramirez. The first is that you don't include areas burdened by easements in your total lot area. So because they're at the maximum of the lot coverage, they would have to go down in size to comply with that. And then, yes, the setback would apply to the easement area, I believe. So there would be some redesign required.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that that's just an asserted easement. There is no easement on the books now.
Correct. Oh, well, okay. So that follows to my next segue question. So for my own understanding, I know that we are not making a decision on the litigating case, but in order to understand for me, what are the odds that this person will actually acquire the easement rights? Does anyone know? Can anyone explain to me what is the argument that this person is bringing up as to how he gains the prescriptive rights to this easement? again, I understand that we don't, we have no say over that, but for my own understanding, I would like to know.
I'll start with the simple version and then I'll let Tim, chime in and
Yes.
give you the legal support. We deal with this quite a bit in the coastal zone where the public asserts that they have acquired a right to use a certain access way. And they acquire that right because they have consistently used that without any interference or permission, direct permission by the underlying property owner. So in some cases, the public can acquire the right to use access route through historical use. And I think in this case, and I think the appellant is on the line and will be able to articulate the basis for his assertion. He has gained a prescriptive right, but my assumption is that it would be because as the owner of the adjacent property, he or others before him have continuously used this strip of land, despite the fact that it's not owned by them. Because of their historical use, they've gained some right to use that. So I'll stop there and let Tim chime in if he's got anything to add.
Yeah, I guess what I'm looking for to see if, and maybe the appellant will explain a little more on this. Is he the only one, or is there more of the public, that has claims to the right of this easement, or is he just the only one fighting for this easement? That's what I would like to understand.
That's my
But yeah, let's let Mr. Fox explain a little more on this case.
Well, I don't really have terribly much more to add to what Steve said, because while the county occasionally litigates questions of prescriptive rights to property, we're not the adjudicative body for this dispute. So
Correct.
I have not undertaken to try to understand the nature of the claim in the lawsuit, because it really isn't ultimately relevant to the question of whether or not the county's agencies need to issue design review and grading permits that have been applied for. So I didn't, and I'm not prepared to discuss the potential merits of the claims between the two parties, other than to say that they need to litigate them in court. We sometimes tell people who raise these issues that it's a civil matter between them and they need to litigate the question between them, because oftentimes somebody wants the county to be the one that takes their side on this. And it's an extremely rare circumstance where there's a public interest that the county feels it needs to intervene on. And in this context, this is a design review permit and grading permit, not an application relating to the easement particularly.
Yes, I totally understand that part. For me, like I stated originally, I know that we are not the ones to decide on anything like this, but I just wanted to understand, to see, what were the odds that this person would actually be able to gain the rights to that, and if there's any chance that we will be revisiting this at a later time, because if that was to happen, if he was to be successful. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, we have an obligation to move forward with whatever is presented before us, and based on the rules and regulations that we're supposed to decide on. So yeah, thanks for the explanation, Mr. Fox.
Is that all your questions?
Yes, I'm sorry, that is all for me.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's any other follow-up questions, we'll go on to the next part, which is have the appellant party present their case, and they'll follow up. When they're finished, we'll talk to the applicant.
Janet, are you there? Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'm here. So I do see we have the applicant on the call right now, who is Edward Love.
We're going to start with the appellant.
The
of course.
appellant.
Hi, this is Olivia. I don't see anyone else online here outside of the applicant.
Go to the right. So do you see where, if you go to, so I do see a hand raised on the attendee side. So I'm wondering if that's the, there's someone calling in by a phone number. So let me go ahead and unmute them and see if that is it. Hold on just 1 second. For caller ending in 8471, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic. Hold on just 1 second. Hello, can you hear us?
It looks like they're still on mute. Do
Hello.
they-
Oh, there.
Hi, are you?
Good morning. This is Jeremiah Armstrong.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm actually dialed in on video as well, but I was having audio problems, so I dialed in also via phone. So if you'd like to see a video of me, perhaps you could go ahead and do that, but you do not need to feel obligated to show a video of me.
Whatever you prefer. We could hear you fine. So I think, there you go. We can see you.
Great, thank you. In light of the county's position and some other developments, I think that it's probably most productive not to focus on the litigation today without revealing, compromising any confidentiality issues. I'm hopeful that some of the ongoing discussions I've had with Mr. Zhang may result in a favorable settlement. And I think that there's plenty of other issues raised in the appeal that set forth why, regardless of the outcome of the litigation, this project's not appropriate to move forward. So I can provide that reason now if you would like. So it's been well established that this is not a dispute over whether Mr. Zhang is entitled to build a house on the subject property. So please don't interpret my comments as suggesting that. Rather, Mr. Zhang has a uniquely shaped lot that presents many challenges. His proposal presents multiple critical problems, particularly pertaining to drainage and to fire risk. This lot has sat undeveloped for decades because of these kinds of hazards. Although I respect the planning department's efforts to analyze code compliance, the problem with Mr. Zhang's proposal extends beyond merely checking the box of certain regulations. The planning department must take a broad and comprehensive view of how the proposal affects the surrounding neighborhood and environment. Given the planning department's project volume, it's easier for the department to simply defer to the applicant's architect or engineer rather than undertaking an independent analysis or engaging with experts hired by concerned neighbors such as myself. In general, the department withholds information from concerned neighbors until the eve of a public hearing so that there's a limited opportunity for independent analysis. And that's what happened here. Despite persistent requests for transparency and updated information, the department has stalled in providing information about its review of this proposed project. In particular, the department waited until the eve of this hearing to release the significantly revised drainage plans, which are critical to this appeal, even though those plans have been submitted to the department by the applicant on June 24, and the department apparently approved those revisions less than a month later on July 23rd. Yet it took the department at least 3 months, I think longer, to provide those revised plans to the public. It's right on the eve of this hearing. So as a result, Dr. Rexford Up, who's my expert that I've engaged, he's not had adequate time to prepare a comprehensive report detailing the deficiencies in these significantly revised plans. The planning department has overlooked or insufficiently analyzed issues during its project review. That's why requested information should be more readily released to interested parties. An example of the planning department's mistakes include its approval of the roof overhang that exceeded the property line setback on the boundary between the subject property and my own property. Although I had previously raised this issue in correspondence and during a COSI design review committee hearing, I had to spend time and money to file this appeal in order for the planning department to force Mr. Zhang to fix his non-compliant design plans. So, a real pivotal issue here as well is the drainage plans, as I mentioned before. So the drainage plans were presented on sheet C1, and I think that Ms. Boo had up on her presentation earlier the most recent version of those design plans, and I don't know if it'd be possible for her to bring those up. Is that possible, Ms. Boo, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to do the share screen.
Okay. Excellent. So, clearly the applicant and the planning department understood that the previously presented drainage design plans were flawed because once they reviewed the analysis presented in my May 26th appeal, the plans were significantly revised and they were resubmitted on June 24. As you can see from in this image and similar images included in the project proposal, nearly 3/4 of this piece of land will be covered in non-permeable surface. So although the revised plans purport to decrease the influx of water at a single location at the rear of the property, the significantly revised plans also introduce a new problem. The revised plans, which now I'm focusing on the element here that is on the southern portion of the property. It has the kind of the blue outline, and this is a proposed channel for water. The revised plans now have this trench. It runs along the southern property line to channel water to the same location near the rear of the property line, which is, as reflected on here, the area kind of southwest of that energy dissipator. The applicant contends that this trench will allow for the absorption of water before it reaches the rear of the property. However, the depth of this trench creates a new problem. Given the proposed grading at the site and the depth of the proposed trench, very little water is likely to be absorbed because there's primarily bedrock under the trench as proposed. Instead, this water in the trench will end up running laterally, meaning into my property that's only 5 feet away. This will undermine the integrity of my wall and fence that run along the property line. In addition, at this depth, it may also sufficiently permeate laterally and leak into my basement. And because Mr. Zhang's expert did not perform boring tests at this location on a property where the trench is proposed, the full effects of the proposed trench is unknown. So approval at this stage is premature. And then also moving just the fire hazards, despite the COSI Fire Department's apparent approval of this project, the fire hazard here is very legitimate. I mean, just last night, PG&E informed me that our power will be turned off this evening and it's not expected to be turned back on until Friday morning. Many of the neighbors here have had their insurance canceled within the last year, have great difficulty getting insurance. And I haven't seen any of the reports that the fire department purportedly put together to explain how this is somehow compliant. There doesn't seem to be any defensible space whatsoever in the rear of the property. In fact, the property line and the edges of that proposed house, they're only about 5 feet away. So there's just, it's sitting on a precipice of a canyon that could go up in flames anytime, and there's no means for the fire department to readily access that area, unlike now. So I think that at a minimum, there needs to be more defensible space there, and I don't understand how that could possibly be code compliant as presented there. Just overall, as seen in the staff report provided here, the planning department contends that all of these potential issues will be addressed at the building permit stage, and just kind of put forward a just trust us mantra. But there's a direct correlation between these drainage and fire issues and the scale of the house. And the scale of the house is something that the Planning Commission is currently considering as part of this appeal. Once these design plans are approved and it moves forward to the building permit stage, concerned neighbors will have no ability to analyze and question the propriety of certain technical decisions, even though they have considerable impact on surrounding structures. So as a result, these issues should be properly addressed right now and resolved in a public and transparent process. So ultimately, we ask that the Planning Commission either reject the project as currently proposed, or alternatively, we ask that the Commission continue this hearing for at least another month so that my expert has an opportunity to fully analyze these significantly revised drainage plans and provide his own analysis to the Planning Department and the Planning Commission. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I'll start off with Commissioner Ramirez. Do you have any questions of the appellant? You're muted.
So let me see. Mr. Armstrong, so you don't want to share with us or with me about your situation with regards to your claim over the easement, because I really would like to understand if that's going to have a consequence later on this project.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about the merits of the easement. My point here was to just try to focus on the, regardless of the outcome of the easement, the merits of the project. And I think that there's some significant flaws in it, as I addressed. As with any sort of litigation, I'm hopeful that we can come up with some sort of favorable resolution so that it doesn't prevent Mr. Zhang from building some sort of house on this property. As to my basis for filing the prescriptive easement complaint, there's significant evidence that the prior owner of my house, I bought this house in February of 2019. The prior owner built this house in approximately 1995, and her and her husband lived here until they passed away. And during that time, the residents here, the owners, used part of that property for a wide variety of landscaping purposes. And in particular, the mailbox is well over the property line and has been that way. We have significant photographs and also a declaration from another neighbor that it's been that way for well over the 5-year period that's necessary to establish a prescriptive easement. So I don't want to go down make it a total tangent as to the litigation, because I don't contest County Council's view that the Planning Department and the Planning Commission has an obligation to analyze the plans as presented right now, regardless of the outcome of the litigation. But nonetheless, I do believe that the litigation is meritorious, but I hope that Mr. Zhang and I can reach some sort of resolution to the benefit of both of us.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I don't have any additional questions.
Commissioner Ketchum, any questions?
Yes, thank you. When you were talking to the slide on the drainage issue, you said that the new development would cover 3/4 of the parcel with previously permeable surface, but the presentation we just listened to said that the house is compliant with the 35% lot coverage maximum. did you just misspeak, or where does the 75% lot coverage come from that you said?
The metric provided by the county doesn't take into account non-structural aspects of this project. So for instance, the driveway and various other aspects of the front yard are non-permeable surfaces. I think that there's other aspects of the landscaping there that will be non-permeable. The proposed trench itself, given the fact that it will have inside it a pipe, makes it a non-permeable surface. That detention basin, the top, I mean, it's quite the opposite of a permeable surface. Instead, it's supposed to release water out. So when it's all said and done, this lot is going to be significantly impermeable, unlike now where it's entirely permeable.
Well, I believe that, well, staff could speak to this later, but I believe there's also a limit on new permeable surface, which is much less than 75%. And
Yes,
which
there's a limit
goes-
of 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. So you can't have more than 10,000 square feet of impervious surface on a lot. So I'd look to Olivia to confirm that the project is compliant with that. I mean, it's got to be based on the square footage of the lot, right? So we haven't, they're compliant with the limits on the amount of impervious surface that's allowed.
Okay, and then on the issue of fire hazard, I'm having trouble understanding how this particular parcel is in any more of a fire hazardous situation than the surrounding development. I mean, I understand the hazards of that neighborhood, but I don't understand why this one is different. This is to the appellant.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think the metric that was just provided as to the impermeable surface area, there must be some other metric because this lot is well under 10,000 square feet. That's about 5,000 square feet. So there must be some other metric to evaluate that. As to the fire hazard issue, it's well understood, of course, that there are fire hazards in this neighborhood. I know that Quarry Park, which I mentioned in my appellant brief, is I know there's been efforts to mitigate that, and there's been some clearing within the last year, I believe, but there are plenty of other areas here on El Granada Boulevard of huge eucalyptus groves that have not been cleared in any way, shape, or form and are ready to go up at any time. Yes, there are structures on this side of the street that are definitely in danger. I guess the question is, why exacerbate that situation, particularly since this is currently an open corridor available for firefighters to attack some of the potential wildfire that would come up that canyon. Currently, the other parts of the street really have no mechanism for a firefighting crew to get to that canyon edge short of an aerial attack. But as it stands right here, they do. But if either the setbacks on the side were not increased so that fire crews could adequately access the canyon, or at least some sort of additional setback on the western edge of the property be more than 5 feet, then we're just contributing to the significant existing fire problem that is there. And,
Okay.
and just, I don't understand how this could possibly be compatible with plenty of other state regulations regarding the amount of defensible space that's required around new structures.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Gupta, do you have any questions of the appellant?
So, Mr. Armstrong, yes, I do, Chair Hansen. What is the side setback on your property next to this project that we are talking about?
Well, I don't have the architectural drawings in front of me, and I actually was not I didn't design this house, but I think that the images reflected earlier may have misconstrued maybe not misconstrued, but may have not been a completely accurate reflection of what the setbacks are, because it provided more of a view of what the roof overhang is, whereas comparatively many of these other images as to the applicant's project are not showing the roof overhang. But I believe that my property, at least I'm really close to it. I guess I could go pull out a measuring tape. I think it's well within the 10-foot setback for at least portions of it. There is a retaining wall that makes up part of that as well. So it depends on whether or not you measure to the full edge of that retaining wall, which actually serves as a property line as well.
So parts of it are 10 feet and parts of it are less than 10 feet.
I'm not sure if that's
like...
actually true. I don't actually have the numbers in front of me. There's a portion of the property line by the street in which the wall itself is not actually the property line. The property line extends past part of that wall. So it may be a little bit confusing on some of these drawings, whether or not we're looking at the property line as reflected on the wall that exists there, or whether or not we're looking at it from the wall, like from the garage side.
So when you say wall, is this the kind of the dividing line between the two properties? Is typically, I'm not understanding which wall you are talking about.
Sure, no problem. So for part of the property that runs parallel to the applicant's property, there's a retaining wall that does constitute the property boundary line. However, there are other regions of that property line there. So the northern side of my property, in which the wall is not the property line. The wall actually comes in, but my property line continues. So I'm not trying to confuse the issue, just other than to say that some of the aerial drawings that we saw may not accurately reflect what the real property line setback is. I could pull out the architectural drawings from the attic or something like that, but
yeah, right. My question came from the same drawings we all are looking at, right? Yeah. So that's where my question came from. And have you had any problems with flooding things since you've been there?
So fortunately, at this location, I have not, and that's because it's currently wildland, and there are lots of various plants there that help with the soil remaining in place. And, it's completely a permeable surface, and it's been this way for, eternity, I guess. But the thing is, with this proposed project, not only will vegetation be removed, and therefore some impermeable spaces will be significantly added to the bulk of this property, but there's also grading that will take place that will remove some of the earth, the soil that abuts my retaining wall. And in addition to that, not only will some of that be graded and removed, but there will also be, under the currently proposed drainage plan, a trench that is, I think, about 2 feet deep. And if you look at some of the geotechnical analysis performed by Mr. Kissick, that will reach nearly the bedrock. And bedrock typically does not have any sort of absorption, meaning the water, to the extent it needs to be absorbed at that level, will need to go laterally. So once there's the grading that brings the soil down, and then the trench also brought down further, because the water cannot further absorb downward, the water will need to absorb laterally, and then that's what effectively compromises the viability of my retaining wall, which is a core aspect of my property to keep all that at bay. And then if it compromises my retaining wall, it can then very easily go into my house and compromise the basement here, which is
Okay, so that's what
furnished in
your,
part.
okay, that's what your analysis shows. Or that's
Exactly.
what-
And one of the shortcomings is, and particularly since this revised drainage plan was apparently prepared at the last moment, there hasn't been sufficient analysis. There hasn't been any boring testing, I don't believe, in that particular spot to determine the permeability of the bedrock under that area. So I understand that Mr. Kissick and the applicant attempted to address some of the drainage concerns presented in my appeal, which I actually find very interesting because it seems as if those drainage concerns were valid, given the fact that the revisions were made. But unfortunately, these revisions were not provided to us until the very last minute, and they also don't seem to be supported by any of the borings that were done in the past. Therefore, we have no data that indicates the permeability of that, we presume, bedrock in that location. So one of my, just to underscore this, one of my concerns here is there's really a lack of transparency as to what data is being used to put together these revised plans. I think that we've seen on many occasions that these plans, particularly for the drainage plans, are inadequate. And my real concern is, the planning department says again and again in their review that, well, this is an issue that will be addressed during the building permit stage. Don't worry about it. We'll make sure we'll cover it in the building permit stage. Well, the problem is at that point we lose all visibility into it. I will have no means to raise any sort of objection if a proposal is presented during the building permit stage that further exacerbates the situation. I won't have any visibility into that whatsoever until the problem actually starts presenting itself, compromising my retaining wall or coming into my basement. So that's why I think it's appropriate for there to be a collaborative relationship between the planning department and affected neighbors. And I understand that in many instances, perhaps dealing with that at the building permit stage is appropriate, but this design of this property is totally, the drainage issue and the design of this property and the scale of this property goes hand in hand. And waiting until the building permit stage to sort this out is too late. So that's why we just asked that sufficient analysis be done and collaboration be done, and that these kinds of last minute revisions are not done at the eve of some sort of hearing where I don't have my own, Stanford PhD hydrologist and civil engineer take a look at this. He obviously knows the shortcomings and has identified them. And we got these plans at the last minute. I had a couple phone conversations with him in which he presented some of these immediate concerns. We would appreciate an opportunity to go with this more thoroughly and perhaps collaborate with the planning department and perhaps maybe Mr. Kissick and figure out the best resolution.
Thank you for explaining that. So your house is on the downslope from this project we are discussing here. And I can see you wanting to make sure that your property is not compromised in any way with the construction of a new home there. And you acknowledge that it's a challenging lot that your neighbor has, right? To construct a house there. Yeah. And to me, it looks like he's trying to work with you on that. After your appeal, he did make these modifications to the roof that was encroaching into the easement or into the setback, and as well as the revising the drainage. So, so I'm looking at it. I kind of have the same question as Commissioner Ketchum did about has in the past any fire equipment tried to get to those mountains, and how did they get there? You have any information about that, Mr. Armstrong?
Whether fire equipment has used that before? Was that your question?
Yes.
Well, I haven't lived here. Like I said, I moved here in February of 2019, so I don't have the full fire history of this area. But what I do know is we are in a very high fire risk zone. And in fact, when the fires in the South County area in San Gregorio and Pescadero happened a few weeks ago, I was down in Southern California with some of my family, and I quickly took a plane ride up here and took all of my family keepsakes with me and piled them up with the full expectation that if there was any sort of lightning strike in this area, and I have a lot of images that my neighbor sent me actually of adjacent lightning strikes, that this hill would go up in flames in just a matter of moments. It'd be similar to what we saw in Pescadero, or probably for those of us who are kind of from the Bay Area, the Oakland Hills fire in the early 90s. So this does definitely present a high fire danger area. And there are very few corridors on this street for which fire personnel have access. I do know that the fire department comes through here on a regular basis and warns neighbors that they need to cut back vegetation, they need to make certain adjustments. I received a notice from the fire department recently, and thankfully I was in compliance. So I'm sure my fire insurance company is thankful for that as well. But nonetheless, this is definitely a high fire risk zone, and there's only one way out of here, and that is El Granada Boulevard. And meaning there's only one way in too, and that's the fire department. And this street gets very narrow at many sections.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for explaining these things to me. No more questions.
A pleasure.
Thank you. Commissioners, Santa Cruz, you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question for Mr. Armstrong. How far into the pending litigation are you at this point?
Well, we filed the lawsuit back in May, and I've had a series of back and forth with Mr. Zhang's lawyer, and we're trying to work something out. I think it's the goal of all the parties to do so that litigation expenses don't spiral. Mm-hmm. So, you know, unless the parties settle, however, resolution in this case could take a number of years, particularly since the state superior courts are quite backed up in light of COVID and everything that goes along with that. But
okay, and then what do you think, like, denying this appeal will help you in any way or hinder in your process? What do you think, like, stopping this project will help you or hinder you in any way?
Well, I mean, halting this project at this point at a minimum would provide an opportunity for there to be more analysis as to, for instance, the drainage issues. But, you know, the litigation is not undertaken as a means to be unfair to Mr. Zhang. The litigation is undertaken to protect my own property rights, and he has obviously different views. So I hope that it wouldn't get to the point where that has to be resolved by a judge or jury. Hopefully the parties can work that out amongst themselves. But but nonetheless, I think that the Planning Commission and the issues raised today and in my appeal brief that extend far beyond simply the litigation aspect, I think those provide a means for the commission to either deny this current proposal or at least continue it so that additional analysis can be performed.
So the process is that, and I'm just not giving you any advice, but I'm just saying it that if we approve this appeal, then your attorney will have the opportunity to file an injunction to stop the project, right?
If the project is approved and if the parties are unable to settle, then it'd be my understanding, and Mr. Zhang's attorney would probably take a different position, but it'd be my understanding that there would need to be modifications made to the current design plans, and that would likely necessitate another go around of analysis by the COSI Design Review Committee, obviously the Planning Department, and maybe again the Planning Commission.
But wouldn't your attorney put a stop into the project if we approve the appeal?
Well, that would be totally up to a court whether or not to grant the, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Are you saying that would we drop the litigation if the Planning Department were to reject the proposal? Is that your question?
No,
or?
my question is quite the opposite. If we approve the appeal, don't you and your attorney have the legal recourse of like file an injunction and stop the project while you guys settle the differences?
Yes, we could ask a Superior Court judge to enter an injunction preventing further development of this property pending a resolution of the matter.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong.
Sure.
That's it, Chairman Hanson.
I don't have any questions for the appellant, so I want to thank you for your time, and we'll now go to the applicant for their presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you very much, commissioners and staff. And Olivia's done a very excellent job summarizing it with the staff report. I'd just like to make a couple of corrections that Mr. Armstrong brought up. Permeable areas. The figure that I heard from him was 75% impermeable. And I think that's a gross exaggeration. And some of the commissioners noticed that also. The impermeable area is basically the footprint of the house, which is 35%, which is 1,789 square feet. The driveway is permeable pavers, so that's not counted. There are some stepping stones, sidewalk, etc. So at the most, probably 40% is impermeable, not 75%. So it's the 40% is very typical of projects, especially when the driveways are impermeable or permeable, excuse me, pavers. The other issue that was brought up was the side yard of Mr. Armstrong's house. And if Olivia can put up the survey, and it's in your staff report, it would be the second page of the staff report. You can see on the survey that the north side yard is the minimum of 5 feet. And there's actually a very long concrete retaining wall that extends back from
Those away. Oh, the dishes and the dishwasher are clean. You need to put those away. Unfortunately.
Will this work, Ed?
Well, do you have the survey?
Let me,
The survey shows it a little clearer.
yeah, let me check.
Okay, thank you.
How's this one?
Yeah, that works. So you can see on the south side of Mr. Zhang's lot, where the property line is, and it should be the second page in the plans that's in the staff report. That the setback at the front of the house is 5 feet, and then there's a concrete retaining wall that goes along the property line and goes back about 45 feet from the side yard. So that's in response to some of the commissioners that were asking about the side yard setbacks for Mr. Armstrong's house. As far as the drainage plan is concerned, I believe Mr. Kissick is online and he can speak to that better than I can. But the other thing I'd like to emphasize is that twice we went back to CDRC, and at the time of the CDRC meetings, the Design Review Committee said, technically we can approve this house now, but in view of the concern of the neighborhood, would you please go back and redesign it and reduce the height and reduce the mass, which we did twice. And we actually dropped the roof of the house down 5.5 feet. And if you look on in your staff report, we show in the elevation, which is A201, that the dashed line shows the original height of the house, and then the present one, the revised front elevation, you can see is 5.5 feet below the original line. We did that by lowering the slope of the roof, by dropping the grade about 4 feet, which is going to involve 330 cubic yards of cut. And even the original house was 1 foot below the 28-foot maximum height. So now we're about 6 feet below the allowable maximum height. And that at the time was really the crux of the neighbor's concern, was the height and the mass. Both have been reduced. Both have been reduced to the approval and the gratitude of the people on the Design Review Committee. And I think that Bruce Chan, who is vice chairman, might also be online, and maybe he can speak to it. I know he did send in an email earlier today regarding that. So those are the main points that I wanted to emphasize, and I will take any questions from the commissioners.
Thank you. We'll start off with Commissioner Ketchum. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Well, let me just say, this isn't really a question for the applicant, but since we've been discussing impervious area with both the appellant and the applicant, I just wanted to say, I looked up, so the current zoning requires for impervious surface area, the amount of parcel area covered by impervious structures less than 18 inches in height is limited to 10% of the parcel size. So in this case, that would seem to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that the lot coverage for the house is 35%, and then you can have an additional 10% of impervious structures, that would be non-porous driveways, decks, swimming pools, stuff. So that still, it's 45% would be the maximum that is proposed here for impervious surfaces. Does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right.
Thank you. I have no specific questions for the, who are we with now? Oh, the developer.
Applicant.
Sorry, applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Gupta, any questions?
Not really questions. Loves clarifying some of these numbers that we weren't clear about. So I appreciate that. At this time, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Santa Cruz, any questions?
No question at this time. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll then proceed to the public portion. I'll turn it over to Janet. She'll describe the procedures for this portion.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and ask my colleague Angela Montes to guide us through the public portion of the hearing. Angela?
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Chairman Hansen. We are now taking public comment for item number 1. As a reminder, if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand through the Zoom feature. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And we had a hand earlier, but I don't see that person on the line anymore. And as of right now, we don't have any hands raised for this item.
You need to unmute Commissioner Hansen.
Thank you very much. We'll wait about a minute here to be sure.
Great. It seems like there are no hands raised, and I have not received any written comment for this item as well. And I would also remind you that if you're not speaking, to please mute your microphone so we can eliminate any background noise.
Janet, actually, I'm hearing a lot of background noises, like in the kitchen or something.
Yeah, I just reminded I reminded everybody to please mute themselves if they're not speaking. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move to, if we have a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion in front of us. Janet, will you go through roll call,
I'm
please?
sorry, Chair. I do see a hand raised now from the public from Miss Sharon V. It's up to you if you would like to take that.
We will accept it and we'll hold off on the vote.
Thank you. Sharon, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking.
Mute. Okay. Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, you were saying about item 1, so that was about the pending litigation. My had a question was regarding the setbacks. The setbacks, I know the commissioners look like they had a little bit of an issue with it only going 7.5 feet back, and that's been my issue pretty much the whole time because I live across the street 2 homes up from this lot. And it looks like they took on the bottom side the Jeremiah's retaining wall up to the garage. And my issue was the 2 homes that they took for the setbacks only is a garage wall that is in the setback, and the rest of the home is pushed back, where this whole home, the whole massing was in the front. And that's been my issue the whole entire time. And then my other issue was, and I've asked, and it's never been addressed, was the Coastal Commission exemption they got. From what I see, it was the Ridgeline Development Design Criteria 13.20.130, which has to do with the ridgeline. And this whole, all the houses that are on that side of the homes tend to step back down the slope, whereas this one just completely sits on top. So if you see the ridgeline from Highway 1, all you're going to see is this big mass kind of sitting on top from the coast, from the ocean side. So those were my most pressing issues that I had and my concerns for this project. You know, like I said, I really thought the massing of the house with the square footage was a little bit excessive for this lot. So I think that's where they pushed everything to the complete maximum. And for a uniquely shaped lot, it does pose concerns for a lot of us. So that's where I'll end it. But thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Sharon. Has anybody else raised their hand while this was going on?
Chairman, I do not see any more hands raised.
We have a motion and a second in front of us. Janet, will you proceed with roll call, please?
Commissioner Gupta?
Aye.
Commissioner Santa Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Aye.
Commissioner Ketchum?
Aye.
Chairman Hansen?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're into our discussion phase. Does anybody wish to enter into this point?
I'll go.
Please.
Okay. So I think the issues we've been discussing, the fire hazard and insurance issues, are acknowledged in this whole neighborhood. And you know, top of the steep slope of a wildland canyon with nearby groves of eucalyptus trees. Everybody in El Granada Highlands is sitting in that. And so I don't see that this parcel just stands out in any way in that sense. The fire department access to the canyon, the thought put forward that this parcel is essential for that. I would think that the fire department had assessed that when they made their comments on this project, but and also I think that setbacks in general are focused on exactly that, for emergency access. That's why we have side setbacks. So I mean, it's not like they're going to be driving a truck down that steep slope. As to the design, I think that the applicant made a significant effort over the 3 hearings at design review to reduce the massing. It seems compatible with the surrounding neighborhood to me. The views from the neighbors' windows, I mean, anybody that had an empty lot next to them and then the house is built there is going to notice a difference. But in this case, I don't think that the neighbor's private ocean or mountain views are overly blocked. As far as the drainage goes, you know, that's always a concern in this whole, like I say, this whole neighborhood is steep slopes and everything, and they're building houses there. And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't, but it's allowed and it's done. People buy the property, they build their houses. That's what they want. And that's what the zoning allows. So the fact that this was presented as more impermeable than it really is kind of undermines the appellant's argument. I guess that would be the only thing that might be left that I would consider, you know, if other people have thoughts on that. That's all I have for now.
Gupta, do you have any comments?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I didn't hear. I echo some of the thoughts Commissioner Ketchum has. I feel that the applicant, the owner of the property, has made significant efforts to work with the design review committee and even take care of the things that the appellant was concerned about, have redesigned this home twice, plus made some additional modifications, took care of the drainage plans, and some of the things about construction still going on in these so-called fire hazard areas and woods and mountains. I don't see how can we not let the applicant build his home there. So Commissioner Ketchum has already pointed out all the different issues that were brought up in front of us, and they have been addressed. Those are my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Ramirez. You're muted, Manny.
Right there. Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on the comments of Ms. Gupta and Ketchum. I believe that what the appellant was, brought forward as far as his objections, I think those issues have been addressed, and on the conditions of approval, I think all of that will be mitigated and properly addressed. So yeah, I think that in general this is a good project. I think that the applicant has worked and then basically I would put it as bend over backwards to try to work with the neighbors and with the CDRC. So the CDRC has already recommended this to be approved, and I take that as a very positive step along the way. So I'm very much in favor of granting the approval of this and denying the appeal.
Commissioner Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I talked to, that's one of the questions that I asked Mr. Armstrong. Since there is a pending litigation, it wouldn't make any difference whether we approve or disapprove. And, they still have this pending litigation. They cannot move forward. I asked him what would be the consequences or the reaction or the negative impact if we approve or disapprove. I think we just ready to, personally, I'm ready to file a motion and we can move on with this project that is being overly discussed.
Thank you. Personally, we went through the process of the design review, because I thought a better house came out of the design. I thought the massing concerns were definitely addressed. I also appreciate the applicant's effort to redesign and work with the community on that. The fire is an extreme issue in the neighborhood. How this house does or doesn't get built doesn't really impact the severe problems that exist in the hills and the coast side. And they should not be the ones to be held back for that. Running the drainage through my head, drainage is always a problem. Different engineers have different ways of doing it. To me, it looked like it might release the hydrostatic pressure on the retaining wall to begin with. Most of my concerns really would have been the house uphill if you remove the toe of the slope and having that one coming down as more than the water coming down into Mr. Armstrong's place. But I didn't spend any real time looking at it, so that's not my expertise to comment on. The transparency issues probably was one of my biggest concerns, because the appellant felt that he was being held back, and that to me, it looked like we are doing the process as best we can in the conditions that we're now living and working under. If he felt, things weren't working as fluidly as they should be, I can't speak for the department itself, but I apologize that you feel frustration. I think we all feel frustration when we can't do the things the way that normally should feel or appear to feel. So, but I didn't get a feeling that anything intentional or bureaucratic was holding things up other than the normal process. So I see no reason to hold that up. Basically, hearing concessions with this, I'll take Commissioner Santa Cruz up on to put a motion forward.
Okay, I'm ready for the motion. Deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Community Development Director to approve the design review permit and grading permit PLN 2019-00162 based on the finding and subject to the condition of approval contained in attachment 8.
I second.
Okay, Janeth, we have a motion in front of us. Will you go through roll call?
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Aye.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Aye.
Chairman Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you.
The appeal has been denied, and it can't. I believe this could be appealed again.
That's correct. This decision is appealable to the Board of Supervisors. An appeal would need to be filed within 10 business days of the Planning Commission's action.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed now on to our director's report.
Thank you, Chairman Hansen. I believe the next item in the agenda is correspondence. There are two pieces of correspondence I wanted to alert you about. The first is a letter that came in from the COSI Design Review Committee. As we've talked about at previous meetings, they're working to establish consistent requirements for story poles, which is a matter that came up in that previous appeal that you just considered. And so their initial proposal regarding story poles requirements have been shared with you as of today. I think Janeth forwarded that this morning. And after it goes through a public review process with the Design Review Committee, then we'll have a proposal for the Planning Commission to consider. So I look forward to working with you to get that issue resolved. And then the other piece of correspondence was from Mr. Greg Dieguez, and he's raised concerns about disaster planning along the mid-coast, which is another issue that came up during the prior hearing. And I'll simply say that this is very high up in terms of the county's priorities and considerations. So as Commissioner Ketchum noted, the Board of Supervisors is actually having an item on their agenda today to talk about fire control, and I will speak more about that when I get to the director's report. So unless there's any questions regarding the correspondence you've received, I'll proceed to the next item, which is a study session for next meeting. At this point, we have two items scheduled for next meeting. They include permits for a new home on Avenue Portola in El Granada, as well as the renewal of permits for the Arata Pumpkin Farm and their commercial recreation activities that they undertake this time of year. So no study session recommended for the next meeting. I did want to let you know that in November and December, there will be only one Planning Commission meeting per month. And that we are right now targeting December as a possible date for a study session on Connect the Coast Side, which is the transportation plan that you've heard about before. So unless there's questions, I'll move on to director's report. Let me start with fire recovery and planning, since I mentioned that earlier, and as it specifically applies to the mid-coast area that we were just speaking of. I have had conversations with both our Parks Department and the Resource Conservation District about making use of current programs being offered by the state to try and expedite vegetation management projects. The governor has declared that such projects as being exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and we're in the process of figuring out the most efficient method of addressing all the other relevant regulations, including coastal development permit requirements. And there's a couple options there. One option is to do what I refer to as a master permit, and that's something similar to what this commission approved for parks and public works when you approved the routine maintenance program that enabled them to do various projects under that larger program, permit for that program implementation. We could do that for a vegetation management program. There's also the opportunity for the Resource Conservation District to apply directly to the Coastal Commission for a public works plan to implement vegetation clearance requirements. So I participated in a call with the Coastal Commission about that option as well. But the bottom line is, as I mentioned earlier, this is high up on the county's priority list. We're collaborating with all the various agencies to see what we can do to proactively manage our fire-prone areas and to address other concerns such as evacuation routes and so forth. So there's a lot of work being done on those matters, and I'll continue to update you as we move forward. Another thing, of course, that we've related to that is preparation for the winter season and debris flows. And so there's been a lot of planning going on, a lot of collaboration with state and federal agencies that are assisting us in both analyzing those risks and preparing for them. So we're actively working on that, and it's going to involve making sure we have evacuation procedures in place for any residents that may be at risk from debris flows. With regard to our services being offered during the pandemic, I can say that it's been, I think, one of the most challenging points in my career as working in the planning and building field in terms of trying to keep our services operational under the current circumstances. We had to quickly adapt to these new circumstances and a workforce that's primarily telecommuting. And the good news is we were able to do that in a manner that has allowed us to continue offering our services. We never shut down our services. But what we've discovered after 7 months of doing this is that by going electronic, we essentially opened up our doors 24 hours, 7 days a week. And the amount of inquiries and work that we are having to contend with because of that has totally overwhelmed the department, to be honest. And so we are in a tough situation right now where we are working very hard to come up with solutions to that problem. But in the meantime, we have applicants that are waiting a long time to get their applications processed because there's just a very long queue of folks trying to get in the door. So we're trying to deal with this problem on multiple fronts, both in terms of staffing and getting more help, more people to process that, but also in perfecting our systems. So I've been informing you about the upgrade that we are doing to our Excel system. And my hope is that that will go a long way in enabling us to provide the customer service that we'd like to provide and that our residents expect. So to all of you that might be listening on the Zoom feed or to the commissioners who might be getting complaints from folks that it's taking a long time, we hear you loud and clear, and we're doing everything we can to address that. So I'll continue to keep you posted on our efforts in that regard. The other thing that you might have heard about, if you haven't yet, you likely will, is about the Ascension Heights grading project. You may recall that was a project where the grading schedule had to get Planning Commission approval. The schedule that you approved was ambitious in that the applicant intended to complete grading by the onset of the rainy season, which according to the calendar began October 1st. They were unable to complete that. We have given them an exemption to enable them to get as much done and get the site buttoned up prior to any significant rains that come our way. But any grading that will extend into the rainy season after we get a significant rain is going to require that a revised schedule be presented to the Planning Commission. So essentially that site is in the process of being buttoned up, and a revised grading schedule will come before you in the near future. And then the final point on my report is just a heads up about the November 10th Board of Supervisors meeting. 2 items will be going to the board, one of which is the new regulations for accessory dwelling units in the coastal zone that you previously acted upon. And then there's 2 county-initiated non-renewals of Williamson Act contracts. So these are not, Williamson Act contracts are contractual items between the board and property owners related to agricultural protection, which is obviously of interest to this commission. When we have lands that have been contracted but are not being actively used for agriculture, we go through what we call a non-renewal process. So the property owners will no longer receive the tax benefits that they otherwise would if they were engaged in active agriculture. So that's our obligation under the Williamson Act, to make sure those contracted properties stay in agriculture. So that completes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do any commissioners have any questions or comments?
I just had one question, Steve. You said that there's a long list of people, of projects, right? Applicants waiting to get their, either it may be permits or whatever. So have we reached our quota? Like we have that 40, that's the number I remember, 40 or so permits that are granted in a year. Have we,
Yes,
will
that
we
quota,
reach that?
no, that quota applies only in the mid-coast urban area, and it only applies to new residential units. I would say that a lot of the permit applications that we're getting these days are for home improvements and remodels, because people are sheltering in place and wanting to build additions to so that their extended family who is now living with them because they couldn't go off to school or wherever else, there's room for them. So there's a real increase in the number of home improvement projects that we're seeing, as well as a lot of accessory dwelling units. Now those would count towards the 40 unit limit, but as you know, the unincorporated county is very large geographically. And so while we're not reaching the limits in the Midcoast, we are reaching record permit volumes. So since I've been the director, every year we have increased the number of permits that we process. And we are on track this year to exceed that record once again. And I would say one thing about the rate at which we've been receiving applications, when the shelter in place came about in the middle of March, the remainder of March was very quiet, as was April. And then things really started coming about again in April. So we made up for about 2 months of lost time and low permit volumes over the course of the last 4 months, which is one of the reasons why we've developed the backlog I've described.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing nobody else wanting to talk, we proceed right on to adjournment.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next.